I was very surprised by the.
Good evening, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well tonight. Tonight is, for the Boundary Committee, the last of your meetings. And I want to start off by saying thank you to our committee members who have participated in this from the very beginning, the multiple meetings. Your hard work throughout has been most appreciated by all of us. The second thing I want to say is this has been a journey, and it's been a journey of twists and turns, dips, valleys, U-turns, some roadblocks, and everything in between. But as I said, we're coming to the end of the journey for you on this committee. So tonight, Rob is going to give you some information about where our concepts are, modifications that were made based upon feedback given through the parent forums, and then share with you where we are with our two concepts. After tonight, at the December 20th board meeting, by Rob about the proposals, and then that'll be done as part of a workshop. Then in the other part of the meeting, when we go to the normal part of the meeting, we'll actually have a recommendation from administration to the board, most likely. And then in January, the board will make a decision on the proposal.
Community, how far we can move things to get at the challenges that we have, right? We have overcapacity in some places and underutilization in other places. And so over the course of these last 6 months, we've been able to learn about what can we do in this community to be able to get at having a boundary plan that's going to give an equitable situation for students, regardless if you're on the north side or the south side, or what level we're talking about at the elementary, middle school, or high school. I really have 2 points of focus of what we're going to do this evening. There's 2 activities. The first activity, when we come to it here in a moment, is going to be what did you learn at the 3 public inputs? What did you learn from the community feedback from the survey? And so we'll have a point on that. The second part of the meeting will be how we've looked at adapting what was presented at the public inputs to be able to address concerns that we heard in different parts of the community, but also still get at achieving some of the objectives that the board set out for us. And as we move through, one of the big things that changed through this process that I think was important for you as a committee, if you remember when we started out, we had a capacity for a building. And then the capacity as administration looked at how the programs were working in those buildings, it was revised. And then as we started to look at buildings, and as you as a committee, as you understood that there was a lot of underutilization, and the natural first step is, hey, is there elimination or repurposing of inventory? We started to reimagine what capacity could look like. So that got into the innovation spaces. So that's how we have that innovation capacity. So capacity has changed as we have tried to move this process along, and so we appreciate you trying to follow along with how those changes occurred through this 6 months. So we will have your poll everywhere questions. We're going to have 2 questions at the end, so it's going to be pretty simple. Again, just hitting some of the highlights of our process. So this is meeting 8. This is our last meeting, and this is a meeting where you as a committee member, you may feel a little bit of nervousness as we're at the end. And is there other things we could have looked at? Are there other ways in which something could have arisen to create something different than what we have in these concepts? That's natural. What you're going to see, though, is a lot of movement in what these plans look like and how they will address a lot of the concerns that we've heard over the last month. From here, as you heard from Dr. Talley, it goes to the board, and then there's another board meeting before they actually approve it. So there's still chances for there to be additional public input at the board meetings. I want you to always come back to these guiding principles. This was set out by the board, and I think it's important for you as a group, too, to remember when we started, the board never directed us to look at consolidating closing schools. That's something that kind of morphed out of the conversations we had here as a committee. Again, each of these guiding principles are prominent in what you're going to see with these final evolutions of these concepts. Again, come back to these boundary criteria. There are certain things that as we started to drill into specifics about where certain students were and what that might mean for creating the equitable experiences as it relates to demographics, that you're going to see some changes in what's being presented tonight. So that's the demographic considerations. The neighborhood's intact. Remember, that goes back to how we've created the neighborhoods to understand what enrollment could be like in the future. And then we've talked about the physical consideration capital, and so that's kind of gone around in some different circles with the innovation spaces. How can we pay for that? What does that look like? But again, our main theme in this particular third criteria is making sure we have the right enrollment with the capacities in those buildings. So all this stuff is very similar to what you've seen before. One thing that I want to talk about, since I have the consensus slide up, is as a committee, we're giving a recommendation to the Board of Education. Administration will also have a recommendation that likely builds on what we have here. Maybe the same, maybe something that tweaks things a little bit differently. Our work as a committee was to get what you're going to see tonight to the point where we've really moved these large rocks, and it may be mostly complete, specifically after you see what this looks like on the maps. As I move through some of this, this is for the benefit of when it goes out to the website to be able to see all of the context of all of these things. So you're going to see the recaps of all the meetings when you go out to the presentation that's on the board site. But I wanted to have this stopping point for that first activity. So with the MetroQuest survey that we had almost 3,800 respondents. And in your packets that you got sent out, you could see the breakdown of not only the elementary, but did they have middle school students? Did they have high school students? We thought that was important to understand where were people responding to the surveys, and how does that maybe relate to the comments. And we gave you in that packet every single comment. We didn't edit them. We didn't try to format them. This was how everybody put that information in, so you could look through that and you could transparently say, oh, here's a comment, and how does this then relate to what your experiences have been trying to create these boundaries that follow the guiding principles and the boundary criteria. So what I want to take here for the next 5 minutes is at your tables. I want you to talk about some of the themes that you heard at the community inputs, and then what you learned from reading about the different comments that were submitted on the MetroQuest survey. And then we'll let you talk at your tables for about 5 minutes, and then we'll just do a report out so that everyone can kind of hear what your general thoughts are. And then we're going to move into the next piece, which is how did we adapt from what we learned from the public inputs? So go ahead and talk at your tables now. All right, take the next minute, finalize your thoughts, and when we come back, one person from your table will do the report out for the entire table. I think they just printed the old stuff and they didn't print the new. This is kind of been our issue.
They almost stagnated. Yeah, I noticed that too.
Well, no, it's all about like when you get the file. Some of that is like LC. And all right, here we go. We're going to start with table 5. Again, one person from the table will give the general report out for what you talked about.
Can you guys hear me okay? One of the, I guess, the two biggest schools that we saw or neighborhoods was the one with Welch. So the neighborhood above 83rd Street that would have been pulled out of Welch. That was one of the things that I saw at the public forums, because that's what you're asking about, right? The public forum stuff?
Correct.
Okay. And, I mean, obviously you guys changed it back and put that neighborhood back into Welch, which made sense. Because one of the parents had actually said, you're pulling this out, you're making it an island, and we have schools that are a little further south, like that had been at Peterson and Kendall, you're moving them up into Welch, and there's still room in Peterson. So obviously you guys listened to that feedback and kind of, and I don't want to say fix that, but you changed it, and I think a lot of people are happy. One of the other things that I know people talk about is, I think it's the Atwater neighborhood up by Longwood, that they are west of the street that is basically the feed into the metro station. And they were very concerned about the safety of their elementary school kids having to cross that street to get to Longwood. And again, you guys obviously heard that feedback, and that also got changed, so those kids are going to Young. I mean, I know at a lot of, like the public forum I was at, a lot of people said, oh, we want concept 3, we want concept 3. But I think in something that you guys showed, in a sense taught me in this committee, is that you don't throw out an entire concept because you don't like one part of it. You adjust it so that it works for everybody. And I feel like you guys did that. Like there was a lot of, there was a lot of support for concept 3 from Welch people just to get that piece of Welch back into it. And even with, like I said, with the piece up between Longwood and Young. So I feel like you guys have made some good adjustments to concept 1 that listen to feedback from the community without having to throw the whole concept out. Does that make sense?
Great. We'll come to table 2. Again, what did you learn from the public inputs survey?
Well, one of the things that we did hear was people did not want their schools closed. It was, feedback that we heard loud and clear across all the meetings that, at least the ones that we attended. And to echo the comments that were made, I do think, the changes that were made reflect the feedback that we heard. There were a lot of, I want to say, angry comments as well about people not wanting to either cross 59 for the subdivision that was moving, from Nequa to Wansea. The one thing that we did kind of discuss was it seems like the responses in the survey were primarily from people that were impacted or would be impacted by the decision. So I don't know if it represents the feedback from the entire district. So I don't know how biased it is. So one of the concerns that we did have and we discussed was, if any potential solution was going to be based on the survey results, it could be flawed, because we believe that it was a little biased.
And before you give it to 7, we would concur, and the survey was never intended to be the baseline of how do we do our changes. It's more that feedback, where are we at, how can we maybe make those changes. Go to table 7.
I think the feedback was, there were a lot of parents who came to the forums very well prepared. You could tell a lot of parents put a lot of thought into flyers, handouts, and other pieces of feedback that were given to committee members. There were only a couple parents and people there who actually, I think, were able to look at a map with me and provide feedback that wasn't, don't close my school, or don't do this to my school. And it was nice to see some of those different pieces of new feedback. I think it was a very overwhelming night for a lot of us here. And anything else that I'm missing here? The process, though, as well, I think was questioned a lot. I got a lot of questions just even about the process, not even about the maps or the concepts, which was eye-opening as well. But overall, a lot of thoughtful feedback from people who attended. And same with the survey results and things, reading those comments as well.
Table 1, who wants to be the speaker?
I think I got elected. We had some just what other people have noticed, but also thinking about how when we started on the committee, we were probably thinking about just our school and our kids, but now we've come to see this bigger picture. And it felt like in some of those community meetings that people were still just looking at their certain level for their school or their child. So definitely hoping that there's a plan to get this information out on the bigger level so people can see maybe this isn't what you want for your child or your household, but in the big picture, it's what's best for the biggest number of students. So I think that was one of the things that, a new comment that hasn't been said yet.
We didn't have too much different to say than what's already been said, but mostly what we heard at the meetings was about not closing schools and support for Concept 3. But now that the schools are not repurposed on Concept 1, I wonder if it would have much more support than Concept 3. And then just aside from the forums, what I hear when I talk to any friends or people, once they know I'm in the committee, I'm always asked about the grandfathering, so I just wanted to put a plug for. People are waiting for that answer very anxiously, even for not just seniors, but current freshmen and current sophomores.
And again, a reminder on the grandfathering, so you all know this, that's something that will come from administration. What that looks like is yet to be fully detailed. Table 6, who wants to be the speaker?
They all at one time pointed at me. No, a lot of what we hit was a lot of what everybody else was talking about, especially going through the comments that were sent. They're very me-focused. Don't impact me. This is going to affect me in this way or affect my immediate community in a certain way. And there's nothing wrong with that. But like somebody else said, being on this committee, you've grown very quickly to, we have to pay attention to everything that's going on in the community as a whole. Like 38, I think you said 3,800 responses. Even going through the responses, it's very easy for somebody that doesn't go through that often to realize how many people were going through repetitiously at the elementary, at the middle, and the high school, just repeating answers, just to kind of skew things one way or the other. And going to the public forums, one of the things that I found really interesting that would skew things is being on the committee, we look at things on it, it's like, okay, I like concept 1, but we need to tweak this, or I like concept 2 and we need to tweak this, or I like concept 3, we should tweak this. When we got to the public forums, everything was very binary. Everybody that came to it's like, I either have to like concept 1 or I have to like concept 3. And when you talk to people, or at least the people that I talked to at those meetings, and when we were out in the hallway in front of the maps, a lot of people would sit there and say, I like direct feeders in concept 1, but concept 3 impacts me better because it doesn't, it closes school, or it doesn't move me one way or the other. And a lot of the things too was people were using the same argument both ways, and that there was a lot of contradiction. One of the things that we were talking about was Route 59. It became very interesting to deal with, because you had some people like, I don't want my young student driver to have to cross Route 59, but you go farther south on Route 59, and they're like, I want my kid to be able to cross the bridge so they can walk to school. So you don't want your kid driving across 59, but you're completely comfortable with them crossing a bridge over 59. A little bit of a contradiction there. But a lot of it was what other people said too. Drive time, how long you're in a bus, stuff like that are major concerns. So, I don't know, did I catch everything that we, okay.
I think our group really echoes a lot of the comments that the other tables have brought up. One additional theme that we heard at the public meetings was the theme of of mental health. We heard from students sharing their anxiety about the potential for change at this time, given that they're coming off of the half-year COVID year experience, the masked year, particularly the sophomores. We're fortunate to have a sophomore at our table as well, and she was able to kind of echo that experience that given the last few years, you're just starting to get your bearings in that environment. And so realizing, of course, that's not a decision for this boundary committee. It's like grandfathering. The timing of this will be a decision for the board. That was definitely an important theme that seemed to come up, and one that, as a boundary committee member, while we can't weigh in on it specifically, we had in the past had in our maps the numbers of students impacted by tables by the different concepts. And I didn't see those for concept 1 and concept 3 that we're discussing. So that would be, I think, an important data point, at least for the board going forward, so you've got that picture to understand the number of students specifically that may be impacted by either option that they pursue, or the hybrid option as it may be as it goes forward. But otherwise, yeah, we would echo the comments of what the others have said. We heard the same things.
Thank you. Table 9, who wants to be the rep?
Okay, so we had a whole lot of indifference about who's going to speak. Largely, just like all the other tables were saying, we had the same experiences. We had a lot of the same comments. One of the things that we did hear that we haven't heard yet is there were a lot of frustration from the community, from people who wanted to be able to speak and were unable to, because all of the speaking slots, or the vast majority of speaking slots, were taken up by just one area. So that's something that I think going forward, as we do these things, if we do something like this again, we need to be able to take into account that all voices need to be heard, and not just the community that overrepresents themselves.
Guess it's me. Kind of coming into the public forum, I was at NEQA, which, I felt probably had the most people relative to the schools slated for potential closure. So, we got a lot of feedback there, and especially looking at the survey, I think there's a category of complaints versus a category of relevant objections, and I think there's definitely a difference between those two. Coming from a sales background, you understand that objections can be overcome with logic, and looking at the bigger picture, complaints are merely complaints. And that's not a criticism of any individual that came to speak, but as a committee, I feel we need to recognize that there is a difference between those two, and to understand that these are all variables and none of them are constants. When you look at a concept and you say, specifically this issue we feel needs to be changed, it's a whack-a-mole game, and something else has to change over here in order to accomplish that. So to the point of some of the other committee members saying, we can't just look at a concept wholesale, we have to be able to tweak it, etc. We need to understand that the rest of that concept isn't a constant, and that any change at anywhere at any point has impact elsewhere. And the two concepts that we were presented for public comment represented two scenarios. One is the pain of closing schools at the benefit of, to a large extent, eliminating split feeders and islands, or we don't close schools and we have to grapple with how do we best address split feeders and islands. And, you know, we see two revised plans here today that don't have any school closures. So I'm a little confused as to how to process much of the feedback we've received, as much of it is not as germane relative to what's now in front of us. Not to say that there aren't going to be some nuances and boundary issues and, you know, street issues, et cetera, but definitely a bit of a contrast from where we last found ourselves.
Great points to end and take us into revisions to concept 1 and 3. So I'm going to generally try to walk you through some of the bigger elements that created the changes that you see. And the majority of them, if not all of them, have come through what you as a committee have talked about, or what we heard at the public inputs, or what we were able to glean from the survey responses. The big change when we get to concept 1 is all buildings will remain open. And that makes some good sense from the standpoint of the reasonings for closing a building, repurposing a building, needs to be more than the exercise that we demonstrated in concept 1, that you could eliminate the 2 smaller buildings on the south side and still adequately have space for all the elementary students to go to the remaining buildings on the south. However, the reasons that you get into why a building would be closed or repurposed, we feel, and I think administration will follow suit and the board, needs to be more than, hey, they are the smaller schools. There may be things about programs, traditions, conditions of the building that would need to be factored in. And so if you go back to how we started on this journey, the first thing that we learned as a group was there's not enough enrollment throughout the district to move them from the north to the south and have capacity where all the buildings would be at 75%. And we tried to demonstrate that early. And so that then sent our wheels turning to consolidation, closing, repurposing, whatever words we choose, to be able to naturally say, hey, less inventory, that means less utilization. So in concept 1, where we evolved to is all the buildings remain open. That then allowed adjustments that were made at the elementary level to go back to, in some cases, more familiarity to the way they are now, or some similarities to what you see in concept 3. You're going to see some of the things that we give as general place names. There could be other smaller components to that region that define that area that we're illustrating that there's some sort of changes. So we heard things from like Emerson Park. We heard things from whether or not something is north or south of the county line. How does that impact? And so when you look at the maps on concept 1, you're going to see all the buildings are open, and you're going to see some different adjustments in the elementary that you still are going to look between concept 1 and concept 3 and say, well, maybe I like something a little bit better because it hits one of the criteria more fully. There could be things, and I'll just bring one example up of what we send to young. In one concept, you may say, hey, that may be a nice near neighborhood area because parts of it already are going to young, but we think since it's closer to Brooks, it would make more sense to go to Brooks. So you're going to see some of those things that play out differently between concept 1 and concept 3. The big thing was having the buildings all online. Concept 3, what we tried to do here is we noticed, and in general, even with concept 1, there's specific places in the district that it's advantageous to have either the way it currently is assigned or being assigned to a building to provide a similar equity piece when we get into demographics. Remember, demographics is our number one criteria. And so depending on the lens you looked at with the data we've been providing you for demographics, you may think one of those components is more fully met. As we were drilling into items like free and reduced lunch, the special education, the ELL, we noticed that there were some imbalances more than what administration would feel comfortable seeing in those changes. And so some of the areas you're going to see change a little bit in both concept 1 and 3 as it relates to our number one criteria, which is demographics. So more than just what amount of housing is single family or multifamily, really digging into some of that student data to try to ensure that we don't create some imbalances on part of doing this boundary change. I'm going to run through a few items. You guys know what we're going to do on this task. So we've given you the handout that has the revised concept 1 and concept 3. I'm going to go through a few of the tables that may not be in your packets. We're also going to put the large maps over the top of what was presented at the public inputs so that you can be looking at your tables at what you're seeing with concept 1, concept 3. You can then even go up to these foam core maps. You can say, oh, here's what it was. How did this change? And then you're going to be able to see at each of the levels how things relate or differ between the concepts. But I want to go through some of the data. We always try to give you some talking points with each of the concepts, and I think the fast facts and summary for concept 1 really kind of highlights some of the things that are happening in concept 1. So again, all elementary schools remain online, and we still have broken feeders. Remember, we started out and we told you from the beginning, we don't know how possible it would be to have a complete elementary to a middle school and into a high school. It's not really possible with where our buildings are, where our kids, households live, type of households, so we're still going to have breaks in our feeder. We do have, again, you can see how the school and middle school is split between Wabunsee and Neuqua. You'll see that when you look on the map. And then in the high school, if you're in the south, one of the things that we heard, which gets at one of the committee comments, I think it was right over here, table 6, with if you are close to Neuqua and on the west side of 59, you may want to go to Neuqua. And so you see that in concept 1 versus in concept 3, more familiar with the way Wabunsee and Neuqua on 59 highway splits. So again, our benchmarks of how we look at this concept, one of the key things, if we're honest about capacity, is on the south side, we're still going to have this underutilization. That's a discussion, as I've tried to outline, that's something in the future. What do you do? Do you need to do anything? This whole innovation space is really a larger topic that we're seeing throughout the state of Illinois, throughout the Midwest region when I go to meetings, because this is not new to districts. When you're declining and you have inventory, we're just now maybe having the opportunity to think about stuff differently. from the social mental well-being to professional development spaces. So there may be a way that the way in which we define capacity may change. So again, that's something for a later date. We've tried to give you some of what we would think are the benefits or the drawbacks to the concept. And I'll put this stuff up. We'll rotate through this as you go through your discussion. But again, this is not a complete list. And you may think some of the benefits are actually drawbacks, or some of the drawbacks are a benefit. We're just trying to give you this from a perspective of how we looked at each of these. If we get to concept 3, again, these fast facts, we still have broken feeders. We are working towards something that would be, I think we've maybe mentioned this, but we haven't really fully defined this, that in the future with our enrollments at each of these 3 high schools, at some point, do we really need the freshman center? And do we look at the high schools from the perspective of having 2,700 students in each of these 3 high schools? So from that perspective, you would try to minimize how many students you put into Nequa, even though there may be space because you have the freshman center. If you're thinking about long-term, is that something you want to do? And so in concept 3, you're going to see us where we're positioned where we would have more similar enrollment numbers in each of the 3 high schools. Again, we still have the underutilization of buildings. Again, that's a topic for a later day, not for what we've been working on here for the last 6 months. Again, we've listed off some of the different benefits versus some of the drawbacks. Again, trying to just be unbiased. How does this maybe look with just the data sets and what this results in? All right, I want to stop on, okay, we have projections. Let me go through this. Okay, I know some people like the visuals of the feeders. And so remember, the dotted lines represent where we have breaks from elementary to middle school and middle school to high school. Solid lines is a complete feeder. And I'll be putting this back up as you guys talk as well, because if you're a visual and you like to see things. Again, here's concept 3. I think the socioeconomic information you have on your handouts, special programming, the housing, again, how we've tried to alert where there's some different changes if you're looking at that from a demographic perspective. Same thing with concept 3. Do the same thing with ethnicity between them at the elementary, middle school, and you'll be able to look at this information. Once you get to the students impacted by the boundary change. So in concept 1, we have about 1,900 elementary students that are impacted. And again, the way we define impacted is if you're currently in that building and we implement this the next year, your K-5 elementary enrollment, it's the current K through 4 students that would be impacted as we go into the next school year. If you're an incoming kindergartner, you're being assigned to whatever that building is, the assumption is, in the next school year. For the middle school, we have about 1,900 that are impacted. And here I believe we looked at the 5th grade through 7th grade to be able to understand those 5th graders. They were thinking they were going into this middle school system. It may be changing. At the high school, we have about 1,200 kids that are impacted. When we look at the elementary for concept 3, I think we're at about 1,700 students. Yeah, about 1,700 students, so a little bit less than I believe what we had in concept 1. Let me go back to that. Okay, we're at 1,900. At about 1,700 here. At the middle school, we have about 2,700 students that are impacted. So more students in the middle school than concept 1. At the high school, about 700 students. So I think this is less. Damn, almost 500 students less than Concept 1 at the high school. I don't think we need to do proximity to buildings. We can bring this up. What I'm going to do now is let you break out into your tables and talk through Concept 1, Concept 3. We're going to put those larger maps up, so feel free at any time to go up. You can look what were those changes. And I think when you look at the labels that are on the map and the comments that we heard, you're going to find that a good majority of the desires for the people that may have been looking at this from their own perspective, we may be able to accomplish. And I always think that's a good thing, and that's why the process has been designed the way it is, so that it's just not the person that's running the numbers, it's not just people that are on the committee, but we do get that community feedback on what these changes might be. So we're going to let you go to work. We're going to put this up. Anything as I'm walking around, or Dave, that you want to see us flash back up here, we'll put that up there. I'm going to start with what the breaks in the feeder are, because I know some people like to just kind of see how do all those lines match up. But I hope you're going to be pleased by what you see tonight, because I think it's a response to what you have been talking about when we left off before we went to the public inputs, and then what we've been hearing at the public inputs. So let's go to work. If I can have your attention, there's been quite a few questions about capacity between concept 1 and concept 3. When you look at concept 3 that has the innovation spaces, that could be between 1 to 3 rooms depending on the building. So if you see in concept 3 buildings that are 95% or even into 100%, that's taking into account innovation spaces. So if it's that full, the district wouldn't be utilizing those classrooms for innovation spaces because it couldn't fit within the parameters we have. So I want you to think about that. The other part is with concept 1, this is not using any innovation spaces. So when you see that there's space in buildings, that would then allow the district to put in 1 to 3 rooms for innovation spaces. Again, I want to give that clarification because we've been hearing that quite a bit as I walked around the table. So continue discussing. All right, here we go. As I've worked my way around, ready to get to the final point, which is what you guys are thinking on which concepts, and then what comments we want to move forward for the board to consider. And so I'm going to ask the ultimate question. So we have two concepts. So if you get your cell phones out, and you guys should know the code to get in. It should be in there. If not, I'll walk around and we'll tell you what it is. All right, I'm kind of gauging by when I see your cell phones down. And it's like pencils down, cell phones down. All right, I'll do a countdown of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. We'll come back because I want to have some comments. The other question that I have, and as you're answering this, one thing that Dr. Talley wanted me to inform you that when we look at the students impacted by the boundary change, when we have the grandfathering student options, however that looks, that's going to decrease what that impact is. So again, what we're giving you a number of, hey, you're physically in a school now. If you are moving to a different school, in the case of elementary, if you're currently kindergarten through 4th grade, 1st through 5th grade, you would be assigned to a different school. That's the students that would be impacted. So anything that comes back with grandfathering, student options, and what that might mean is, this is a hypothetical, it could be that, hey, if you are a current 3rd and 4th grader, you'll be able to remain at your current school. Hypothetical, I'm just giving you an example of what something with grandfathering, what it might look like. Right. I'm now going to go back to, we had the 69% concept 1, 31% concept 3. So the next thing is, again, our goal is, here's what we're giving to the board. And what I've circulated to different tables as I got around, they're like, hey, well, there might be some other things that with the concept we would like to consider. So if you've written those things on sticky notes, again, just like every one of our meetings, you can bring those up to us. The goal is what we give to the board on December 20th is this body of work. So here's concept 1, here's concept 3. The preference that the committee had was towards concept 1. What I want to give you as an assignment, since you have sticky notes, if there was about 68% of you that said concept 1, put on there what is the benefit of concept 1. If you were someone that liked concept 3, there was about 32% of you. Again, put concept 3, and here's some of the benefits that we like. It could be things like, when I look at concept 3, this looks more familiar at the high school level, right? This is something that is pretty darn similar if we put the current map there. So that may be a reason why you like concept 3. Some things that I've indicated at the tables is there may be something. I think one table was saying, I like the elementary concept. I think maybe it was concept 1, but I really like the middle school and high school in concept 3. There may be some ways in which we look at this, because as the concept morphed into all buildings remaining open, there were some similarities on how we address the enrollment challenge as we move from the north to the south, and what that means for those middle schools in that central belt. So go ahead and write those things out. This is probably the more important part, because the board knows that you've worked hard on this. They know this has not been easy, and we know that with the change, some people are not going to like what those changes might be. And so the comments that you guys made through this journey of 6 months, you've kind of learned some things, and I think the board would like to know what are those things that you learned that may help them deliberate toward which concept would be the concept that is approved. Did I step on any feet there? All right. I'll let you guys work through this because I want to make sure you get those comments made. And I'm going to let you go till 8:15, and then I have one other question. And then I will turn it over to the board president for some final statements. All right, the next question that I will want you to ask, I don't know if I go back if it still holds the numbers in there. I think it does. So what I want to know is if you agreed with this statement, why did you agree with it? And if you were someone that disagreed, what were those reasons? So again, on the top of it, put disagree if you had a disagree, so we know what the element was that you disagreed. If you agreed with this, what were the things that you agreed with? That's my last question. We'll give you a couple minutes to do that.
So everybody, the board started this process and asked for a committee, and I want to thank all of you on behalf of the board for all of your dedication and hard work. This has gone on since July, and I know for some of you this wasn't what you anticipated it was going to be. It's been very hard and a lot of work for everyone. And I want to just say that we truly, truly appreciate all of your comments and your effort. It was very welcoming to hear the conversation earlier about how everyone worked on changing their perspective from me to a we, and that was an extremely important point and what we wanted to see from this committee. So thank you on behalf of the board for everything that you've done and truly, truly important work for our district. So thank you so much.
So I'm between you and leaving. So I won't keep you very long, except to say, echoing what Ms. Donahue said, thank you very much, all of you. We appreciate all your hard work and look forward to talking with you at some point in the future. Have a great night. Thank you.